page out of Admiral James T. Kirk's playbook in Wrath of Khan. It's important to understand how things work on your enterprise. We help our students understand how things work on their enterprise. We don't teach them how to do things as much as we educate them as to try to understand how all of these things come together. And their role is not just to have a one and done educational experience. We educate them to be lifelong learners because the technology is going to change quickly. And if you want to be the master of the technology, you got to continually invest the time to learn.
This is All Quiet on the Second Front, podcast where boring conversations around defense tech and national security come to die. Join me, Tyler Sweat, and my Second Front homies as we dismantle the mundane and cut through the bureaucratic bullshit to demystify the world of defense tech. But be warned, this is not a typical government podcast. Are you ready to get weird?
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Tyler Sweat. Welcome to another episode of All Quiet on the Second Front, the podcast where boring defense talk goes to die. Really excited today to have Greg Touhill with us. I'm going to let Greg introduce himself, talk more about his unbelievable career. But I think we're going to be able to get into a little bit more of the meaty sort of cyber topics today and what that means or doesn't, and sort of the impact on how that translates to how we're building the next generation of the community of practitioners, of leaders. So without further ado, Greg, welcome and thanks for joining us today, brother.
Hey, thanks, Tyler. Pleasure to be here with you. Yeah, you said before we even started, you wanted me to give a quick rundown as to.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell the people who you are. I've had, like I said, I had the pleasure of crossing paths with you almost a decade ago now, but excited to recross them here.
Yeah, for the audience who doesn't know me, I'm Greg Touhill. I'm at Carnegie Mellon University's Software Engineering Institute, where I am fortunate enough and blessed to lead the CERT, the birthplace of cybersecurity. And my background, I spent 30 years, 1 month, and 3 days on the United States Air Force, retiring as a brigadier general and one of the very first cyber operators in the Department of Defense. I only know the 30-year, 1 month, and 3 days because they read that at your retirement ceremony on the retirement orders. After that, I was recruited by a guy named Mike McConnell, the former director of national intelligence, who saw what I was doing in the DoD. And I was asked to continue my service at DHS, where I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communications, and simultaneously served as Director of the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, where I got to deal with all sorts of fun things in cyber, including the OPM breach incident response, the Sony breach, leading the US CERT and the Industrial Control System CERT, and acronymed organizations. That organization morphed into CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And I concluded my federal career as the first Chief Information Security Officer of the United States government. Then I pivoted into industry and teaching. I started teaching at Carnegie Mellon University, Georgetown, and a couple of other universities. But I also went into industry on several different boards and had very good success with startups. But, I was missing the mission. And when the phone rang saying that the CERT job was open, I raised my hand to continue my service because CERT is the Department of Defense's Applied Research and Development Center for all things cyber. And as part of the Software Engineering Institute, we do software, we do cyber, we do AI engineering. We're really on the cutting edge of turning science fiction into reality.
It's it's an unbelievably impressive career and background. And I would be curious, you sort of made the joke of, hey, I know, 30 years and all that because they read it at retirement.
Yeah.
We think about on one side of the spectrum, right, teaching sort of at Carnegie for the last 8 years, and on the other side, sort of a 30-year career as, one of the plank holders of sort of the cyber operators that we've come to know today. How do you look at both of those experiences and think about maybe the volume and the rate of change? Because I know everybody always says, hey, things are changing so fast right now. Did it feel the same way when you were going through in the Air Force? Or does it feel like, hey, change is just happening so fast now in cyber that it's difficult to keep up?
Well, when we first started, a lot of the decision makers were looking at some of the propositions we were making as science fiction. No, we don't need that. Who would possibly hack into our systems? The too many folks don't understand how things work and why. And when it comes to cyber offense, the advantage goes to the attacker, because the attacker will read the frickin' instruction book and make sure that all those things that you didn't read in the instruction book, they're going to leverage. Now, though, I think we're finding greater appreciation in the boardrooms across America and around the world that cyber defense matters, and also that there is a threat to the Death Star from malicious actors, but it's not just the malicious actors, it's also the careless, negligent, indifferent, or overtaxed people in our own ranks, as well as some of the purveyors of the systems and the software that we consume to fuel our businesses, our economy, and the like in the digital economy. Some of the stuff that's being put out there still is cruddy. There's a
Yeah.
lot of cruft in there, and for your audience members, cruft is just kind of like garbage code that doesn't really add value to it, or has it's not secure by design. And those type of things are part of what we've traditionally looked at in CERT, is to how do we make software even better so that it's not posing as much a risk to an organization's operation. And sadly, it doesn't matter if it was 1980s or in 2020s, we keep on seeing crappy products, and uh, we're making some progress in a lot of areas, but we still need to double down on embracing secure by design.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, hey, we've had, crappy products, and we've had, difficulty with signals and noise sort of across the generations, and all of these different sort of phases in time. As you're, put your sort of teacher hat on, as you're looking at, the students, the practitioners, the leaders of tomorrow, how is that and I think, just access to information, and whether it's LLMs or just the ability to democratize some capability that used to be reserved for larger institution, how is that affecting either the way you're sort of teaching and framing the practice, or the way they're learning and sort of experimenting with it?
Well, I think, if we take a look at how things were 8 years ago, and you mentioned LLMs, you know, the research on artificial intelligence and machine learning is not something that, it's an overnight sensation. It's an overnight sensation that was 65 years in the making.
Yep.
It goes back to, the mid 50s where that phrase was coined. When it comes to teaching and the frameworks that we are employing with our students, uh, you know, some of the basics are still the same. We want to make sure that we understand that key cyber terrain. And now it's a lot different than it was 8 years ago as we've introduced greater capabilities in cloud computing, for example. We're seeing the strength and power of a lot of the GPUs that help process all of these large language models and help us consume all the data. That becomes, supercharged compared to where we were 8 years ago. If we take a look at the demand on infrastructure, power, water, telecommunications, and such, to drive the data center environment, it's completely different than it was 8 years ago when I started teaching here at Carnegie Mellon. So what we focus on with our students is, take a page out of Admiral James T. Kirk's playbook in Wrath of Khan. Check it out, minute 52. It's brilliant. It's important to understand how things work on your enterprise. And we help our students understand how things work on their enterprise. And we don't teach them how to do things as much as we educate them as to try to understand how all of these things come together. And their role is not just to have a one and done educational experience. We educate them to be lifelong learners because the technology is going to change quickly. And if you want to be the master of the technology, you got to continually invest the time to learn. And if you don't, you're going to lose control of your enterprise.
It's a good way. It's a good framework to explain that. I don't think I'd ever thought of before, of like knowing how things work in your enterprise, and part of our own sort of personal Kirkdom is continuing to assess and understand what in fact constitutes what is the enterprise.
Yeah.
You know,
And,
as
it wasn't just Kirk, Tyler. I
yeah,
can go to Picard. I can go to Archer.
yep,
I can
yep,
go to Pike. All of them. Every
yep.
good captain of a starship understands their enterprise. And if you are in the cyber business, if you don't understand your enterprise, you're going to lose. You're going to spend way
Amen.
too much money. You're going to accept risks that perhaps you didn't even know you had. And in today's business world, in today's military or government organization, you need to be better at understanding your enterprise.
Yeah, and so take that for me to the rage, not rage. So let's say hype maybe around AI security versus cybersecurity, and how should folks be thinking about those as their own sort of separate constituencies, but also how does that affect that broader sort of the risk register, so to speak, when they're brought together?
Well, thanks. I'm one who believes that AI vulnerabilities are cyber vulnerabilities. And here's why. First of all, AI is software based. Sound familiar? Cyber software. Two, AI resides on huge compute fabrics. If you take a look at how AI systems are built, it's compute and it's on huge scales and it's distributed often amongst many different platforms, hybrid clouds. It relies on exquisite transmission between different elements in the AI systems. And the data upon which the models are trained, as well as are continually updated, that's all part of that cyber domain that we've been using for decades now. So to say that AI is different than traditional cyber domain type activities, that's a subtle nuance. If you're thinking enterprise IT, yeah, it's a little bit different in
Yeah.
some regards, but it's still the same physics. It's still the same mechanics. And as we take a look at adversarial AI and some of the research that we're doing, we're seeing bad actors already taking action against the repositories for the models. The GitHub-like type of repositories for different AI models. They're all being, salted and poisoned at some point with tampered with models. We're seeing supply chain attacks against those GPUs and against the major components of the AI systems. We're seeing tampering with the data and data poisoning attempts. We're also seeing unintended sloppy code in some cases where, folks who are not necessarily trained software engineers are banging away in Python because they took a class on Python and now they're repurposing themselves as AI coders or AI experts. And they're being a little bit sloppy at times, where our researchers who are pretty smart PhD researchers, and some, they're complemented by some really exquisitely trained network engineers and folks who have been specialized in computer forensics. We're finding a lot of gaps out there. And what could possibly go wrong with AI, with built-in software deficiencies, risk factors, and the like? So we're sharing our work, and we created the AI CERT, an AI Security Incident Response Team, back 2 years ago. And we're continuing to get more and more reports on vulnerabilities. And following the model that we did with cyber, we're running the Cyber Neighborhood Watch that includes AI as part of the cyber neighborhood.
And as you think about, you your first federal CISO, you've done a pump in industry as well. For folks like me on the outside, or my CISO and our teams that are continually trying to assess and make sure we're identifying and really have that risk register and take this seriously, where one, hear what you guys are working on, what do you point people at when a CISO comes to you and says, hey, how should I think about, how can I get smart on? And two, I think so much of what's underpinning all of this, whether it's robustness or it's the security, there's this aspect of like human machine teaming and trust that
Yeah.
sits under. And how do I understand what I should and shouldn't trust? How do you counsel CISOs and other cyber and security leaders around that?
Well, we actually this morning had our executive leadership team meeting, where I brought in one of my researchers, Brett Tucker, who leads that practice, and talking about what he learned as a nuclear engineer in the United States Navy, and then working in Westinghouse about safety and security and nuclear propulsion, and applying those lessons and the math behind that into cybersecurity. And by the way, your audience members can read a lot of what Brett and his team have done by going to our website at SEI, that's SEI as in Software Engineering Institute, .cmu for Carnegie Mellon University, .edu, and just go in and type in your keywords, like risk, resilience, and that.
We'll make sure to get that in the show notes too, as a
Yeah.
good link to be able to hang for everybody there.
So this is really complex, Tyler, and that's why the uniqueness of the Software Engineering Institute is we are multidisciplinary, and we have folks who really do well in math, because this one is a multimodal differential equation in trying to determine how much risk are you willing to accept, because you'll never get risk to zero, but you have to get it within the bounds of what is your mission, what is your risk appetite, what is at risk, and what capabilities do the adversaries have, and what do you offer to defend against the adversaries? So you have all these variables acting simultaneously. It's really, really difficult. But we also collaborate as part of our research with folks like from the insurance industry and actuarials who kind of specialize in this. And we invite folks from industry to reach out to us to collaborate. But I think as you take a look at the bottom line is business executives want to pay as little as possible for cybersecurity protection. But they want enough to protect them from the really bad things from happening. And that's going to vary by business, by size, by market, et cetera. And we're in the process of doing some interesting research to see if we can help provide a model and a framework that is executable for businesses regardless of size and regardless of sector. And frankly, it's a work in progress. So we invite different businesses to come in and participate with us and help us out.
It's I mean, it's interesting. To your point, right? I think cyber, I mean, back in my Topfer days, I think I probably did 10 or 15 different projects on, how do we bring the CISO into the boardroom and how do we make cyber sort of a force multiplier and not, sits at the end of the table with like the legal team. And when there's a problem, you throw it down to the end of the table. How are you seeing, or I guess, when you think about that, hey, we're looking at cyber as hey, it's a necessary evil, but it sits sort of out there. Where are you seeing maybe an example of it being done really well? And then, not to name and shame, but like, what are some common mistakes you see? And you can sort of take that and either way. I don't just want to look at the negative side because I know there are folks doing it well. It's just not a standard or a norm.
Well, I think taking a look at who is getting it from a messaging standpoint, and there's plenty of really great examples out there. But I think the one that's most profound right now is Comcast, because Comcast is looking at their cybersecurity posture as a market differentiator. So as opposed to looking at their cybersecurity as a cost center that's just kind of consuming resources but not delivering to the business, Comcast is marketing their cybersecurity capability as a market differentiator. And it's attracting a conversation with some folks to say, I'm going to maybe pay more attention to Comcast for my business than I am going to go with somebody else because they have this particular cybersecurity capability that's above and beyond what my potential other providers could have. So I think that's actually profound, and those type of conversations are interesting. But I think as you take a look, you want to make sure that have that conversation with other folks. It's not just Comcast. Everybody should be having that conversation. So I'm not endorsing Comcast. I'm just saying,
no, it's a good example.
They've got a good marketing scheme. But I think
it's a great example.
I've been a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission for Cybersecurity at the National Association of Corporate Directors. And we've polled a lot of businesses and taken a look at how we are getting the message out in the boardrooms. I think over the last 10 years, the boardrooms now understand cyber as a risk. And more and more, the risk discussion in most businesses continues to be dominated by cyber, as opposed to it's an afterthought and bolted on. So I'm seeing a lot of positives in boardrooms all across the country and around the world, where cyber is now recognized as one of the principal risks for business viability and risk exposure. And I think we're going to see that continue to be the case. And there's going to be certainly a great market demand for automated systems that are going to reduce the cost of understanding and managing that risk and helping companies figure out how to take that cyber punch and keep on going without breaking the bank.
Yep, it's a great answer. All right, so as we turn the corner kind of into we'll call it the
Oh,
last.
I'm sorry, Tyler. One last thing.
Yeah,
Comcast is not my provider.
yeah.
So,
All right.
but
So as we sort of turn corner into last couple questions here, right? I'm gonna do one sort of kind of tactical and then one maybe more strategic or unbound. Um Again, and I just is for me sort of having two teenagers and just watching how much the world has changed in like the last decade of their life. I'm fascinated with sort of the teaching viewpoint as you're watching sort of, really different like micro generations kind of move through is so my question there with all of that long-winded wind up is what is one thing that you wish that, whether a CMU student or, NC State or, wherever, what do you wish more folks that are coming up in the cyber community, what do you wish they understood earlier in their journey?
ooh, I didn't see that one coming. Um, I think one of the greatest lessons that I learned in my military career is applicable to answer this question that you just asked. And that's you have to be brave and be bold to ask questions. Often folks go into a defensive crouch and they're kind of embarrassed about asking questions.
Yeah.
I learned in my military career that asking questions is a sign of wisdom, not of weakness. And even more important is asking for help. So I'll distill that down to if there's a hidden superpower you need to nurture, it's the ability to ask for help and be bold to ask lots of questions too.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Thank you for that. All right. So final question. And I'll caveat here with this can be about cyber or AI security and all of the awesome stuff we've talked about, or it can be completely disconnected. I like to end with the sort of king for a day. So if you had a magic wand, you could wave it and make one thing come true, one thing be fact without a caveat or having to say, hey, if then it would just your intent would be fulfilled. What's the one thing you'd change and why?
I would use my magic wand to make sure that uh, every software product that is being delivered to the market is following the secure by design principles, which include peer review, which scrub out all those vulnerabilities from the very beginning
Yep.
and reduce our risk exposure. Um, I see a lot of products out there that keep on coming off the line, and no software is perfect. But right now, I'm getting a lot of patch fatigue.
Yeah,
So I think
that's fair.
better quality software from vendors everywhere. The rush to go to market is causing us to pay a terrible price.
Yeah,
And we can be
that's
much more effective, efficient, and secure.
yeah, that is a very appropriate answer. I appreciate that. Well, Greg, listen, I think I mean clearly I'm a fanboy, so I would love to be able to do this for hours and just hear your thoughts on all of this. You've had an unbelievable career. The work you are doing, at CERT, I'm grateful for, but I think I'm most grateful that you're sharing the knowledge with the future. And planting a whole bunch of seeds of trees that like we're not going to enjoy the shade of, right? It's what we all need to be continually doing. So thank you for what you've done and what you're still doing. And
Thanks.
thanks for making some time.
Yeah, and you got our website, but I'd also invite folks who are coders, go visit our GitHub site
Yeah.
too. because we share the code we develop on behalf of the United States. We share that widely,
That's awesome.
and it's all available. So we look forward to continuing to serve the country and providing great return on investment as we've done for the last 40 years here at CERT.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Cheers.